So it was very complicated. It's not just he touched me and he kissed me and he did these things to me, but he literally my dad laid the foundation, I feel like, for my life, thankfully, for 12 years before Robert, or 11 years before Robert came into our life, of the Lord, and going to church, and our really understanding the Bible, and he did that also through my adolescent years. But on top of that, the framework that was created with Robert, that literally framed how I thought about relationships and men and what love looked like, that was the most detrimental part of all of it.
It's basically like a twisted framework. Like, I had a foundation that my parents had built up till I met Robert. And then everything else that was on top of that foundation was just tweaked wrong. There were some parts that were still growing properly, but that part of it was just, I call it twisted. I heard Henry Cloud, who obviously we all know Robert has gone to for a few years. He shares his own story in, maybe it was a year ago that he shared his story of going to Henry Cloud, I think, for the last few years. And I heard Henry being interviewed by Joyce Myers recently, and he called it, the wiring is wrong. When a child goes through abuse and that kind of trauma, their wiring mentally, emotionally, it's just not wired correctly. So you have to pull those wires and rewire as an adult. So, I mean, I could go into all kinds of detail of how those choices that I made as an adult stemmed from the wrong wiring, or the twisted framework, as I've called it. And as an adult, obviously, I have to take ownership for those. Right. Know now why. I understand why, and I understand the rewiring, and I've been working on that off and on for years, for decades. So I think people just don't understand that part of it unless they've been abused, and the shame that goes along with all that.
That part of it, the physical touch part of it, for me, seems like maybe it's less important than what happened with the framework that was developed through all those years. It wasn't, like I said, it wasn't a one-time thing and done. It was my entire adolescence was being shaped into adulthood by a pedophile, by an abuser. So the person that was touching me my entire adolescence was teaching me that abuse is love. That this is what it looks like when someone cares about you. This is how they touch you. This is what they do. So that framework obviously carried on into my adulthood.